directly jump into the next topic. Okay, so in conditional statements, right? So let's reiterate what all things we have discussed so far. Okay, so let me just simply minimize this. Okay, so let's reiterate what all things we have discussed so far. Okay, so we have seen what all things we have seen so far, right? We have seen what a variable is, right? And how to declare a variable, right? So declaration of variables also we have seen, right? And then what we have seen after that, right? So we have seen the data types as well, right? So how many types of data types we have, right? So we have, so majorly, so we have primitive data types, right? So, and along with that, right, we have some data types that were defined by Salesforce, right? So what those data types are, like, so collections, but we haven't discussed all of this. Okay, so collections, right? So enums, right? So, and what more, right? So classes, right? So classes, objects, and interfaces, right? So, and there is one more thing that we have left, right? So what is that? Anyone remembers that? Okay, yes, S object, right? So there is something called S objects as well, right? So we have missed that, right? So these are all things comes under data types. Okay, so all of these data types, whatever that we are seeing here, so all of these data types were created by Salesforce, right? So for our so for easy so execution of things within our code. Okay, so if you don't have these kind of, if you don't have these data types, right, you have to build all of these data types by yourself, right? So to reduce our work, Salesforce has built these data types with the help of primitive data types, whatever primitive data types that we have, right? So it has built all of the other data types with the help of these primitive data types. These data types we haven't seen yet, but we'll see all of them. Okay, but let's quickly see what all primitive data types that we have, right? So we have integer, right, which stores number, right? So, and then after that, right, so long, which stores bigger numbers, right? So decimal, which stores, right, so decimal numbers, double, which stores bigger decimal numbers, right? And after that, date, which stores date, right? So, and then date time, which stores date along with time. And we have some variable called some data type called time, which stores only time. Okay, and along with that, we have ID, right, which stores ID of any of the records, right? So, and along with that, there is one more thing, I believe. Can someone tell me? Yeah, so which is Boolean, which stores either true or false value, right? So these are the data types that we have, right? So this is also something we have seen. Okay, so, and what's next, right? So we have seen what is a statement and what is an expression. Okay, so what is a statement? What is a statement, right? Any instruction that we give to our computer to perform a particular task, right? So generally within our program, right, so you'll give multiple instructions. Okay, multiple instructions you'll give, right? So each and every instruction can be considered as a statement. Okay, each and every instruction can be considered as a statement, right? So then what is an expression? Okay, so this statement can be either a single line of code, right? So this statement can be either a single line of code or or what is it, right? A block of code, right? A block of code, right? So that is what this statement is all about, right? So instruction can be a single line or it can be a block of lines. Okay, so that's why right, so I said, right, it can be a single line of code or a block of code, right? So, and what's next, right? So we have something called expression. What is an expression, right? So any statement, right, any statement, right, which evaluates to single value, okay, which evaluates to a single value is called as an expression. Okay, so a is equals to 5 is an expression. Why? Because, right, so into a we are having 5, right? So this is evaluating to a single value, right? So now you have b is equal to 3 or something like that. This is also an expression, right? Now c is equals to a plus b, right? So this is also an expression. Why? Because this is evaluating to a single value, right? So at the end of the day, what will happen, right? So 5 plus 3 will become as 8, right? So it is evaluating to a single value, right? So these kind of things we call as expressions. Okay, we call them as expressions. Whereas statement, right, can evaluate to a single value, or it need not to be. Okay, so that is the major difference between statement and expression, right? So an expression can be statement, but a statement need not to be an expression. Okay, that is something you guys have to keep in mind. And what is the next thing, right? So each and every expression or a statement, right, so ends with semicolon. Okay, if that is a single line of code, right, it ends with a semicolon. Or if it is a block of code, right, so that should be written within curly braces. Okay, so these are the things, right, we have seen in terms of statements and expressions. Okay, and after that, right, so we have seen operators, right? So what all type of operators that we have? Right, we have an assignment operator, right, so will help us in assigning a value to a particular variable, right? So a equals to 5, that means this equals to symbol generally helps us in assigning the value, right? So this value, right, so the value that I'm like, so the ones that is towards the right side of that assignment operator, right? So whatever that we have, right, so that value will go and sit in so whatever we are so using towards the left side of that equals symbol, right? So it will go and store in this particular variable. Okay, variable or expression or whatever it would be, right? So that whatever that we have given towards the right side of that assignment operator, that will go and sit in the ones that we have kept in the left side of that equal to symbol, right? So that is what this assignment operator is. It generally assigns a value to a particular variable or an expression or whatever it could be. Okay, so that's what assignment operator is all about. And then we have arithmetic operators, right? So plus will help us in adding so two variables, two integer variables, right? So minus will help us in subtracting so one variable from the one integer variable from other integer variable, right? So multiplication helps us in so multiplying two integer variables, right? So division helps us in dividing two integer variables, right? So and then we have modulus, right? So if we want to use modulus, so how we have to use, right? So we have to use math.mod. Okay, so wherein math is a class and mod is a method. Okay, modulus method, right, from the math class. Okay, so there what you have to do, right, you have to pass two numbers as parameters. Okay, so 10 or 5, right? So if you want reminder, right, so between 10 and so when you are dividing 10 with 5, right, so what is the remainder? If you want that, then what we have to do, we have to use math.mod, right? So mod operator should be called like this. Okay, so math.mod, and you have to give the two numbers. Okay, so then two integers. Okay, then what will happen, right? It will give you the remainder, right? So it will so divide 10 with 5. Okay, so and 5 2s are 10, and the remainder is 0. Okay, so you'll get the modulus. Okay, so this is what the modulus is all about. Okay, that's what it is, right? So and then we have relational operators, right? So now if you want to compare two variables, right, we use relational operators. And then we have logical operators as well, right? So if you have two expressions, okay, so if you have two expressions, expression 1, right, so expression 2, and what these expressions should be, these expressions should be of type Boolean expressions. Okay, so if you have any two Boolean expressions, right, so and so if you are using and between both of those expressions, then what will happen, right? So if both expressions are 2, right, so the final output will be true, right? So if you are using and, so both the expressions must be true, right? So if you are using or, right, so in that case, if either of the expressions is false, sorry, if either of the expressions is true, then it will be become true. Okay, so you don't need to have both the expressions as true, right? If either of the expressions is true, right, so if you are in that case, what will happen, right? So you'll get true as an output. So that is what or is all about. And what about not will just simply invert whatever so value that you are getting, right, out of a given expression, right? If you are getting true out of an expression, then it will give you false as an output. If you are getting, right, false as an output of a particular expression, if you are using not before that, it will convert that into true. Okay, so it will just simply convert it. That's it. So and then finally we have increment and decrement operators, right? So if you are using any integer, right, and if you are just simply so using this increment operator, then what will happen is that, so whatever value that you have in a, right, so that value will be increased by 1. Okay, so if you are using decrement operator, what will happen, right? Whatever value that you have in so that a variable, right, it will decrease it by 1. Okay, so if you're executing like this, right, I mean, like if you're just simply using this operator, then what will happen, right? So the a values will become as 2. In this case, what will happen, right? So the a value will become as 0. Why? Because 1 minus 1 is 0. Okay, so that's what this incremental operator is all about. Okay, so and then right, so there is one more thing that you guys should be knowing, right? So let me just simply show you that, right? So in terms of assignment operators, right? So a is equals to, right, 5 or something is there. Okay, and then, right, so if you want to add something to it, right, so how can we do that, right? So a is equal to a plus 1 or 2 or whatever it is, right? So this is how we do it, right? So then you'll get output as 6, right? You can write it like this, or you can write it like this as well, right? So this one, right, and this one are same. Okay, a is equal to a plus 1 and a plus plus is also the same thing, right? Both will evaluate to the single value. The same way, there is one more thing that you need to know, right? So a plus equals to 1. You can write it like this also. Okay, so what does it mean, right? So what this means, a is equal to a plus 1. Okay, you can write it like this as well. Okay, so please keep that in mind. Okay, it is not just so with so plus operator, right? So you can use any operator in that matter, right? So this equals to what? A is equals to a plus 1. Okay, so a minus equals to 1. Say for example, if I'm giving like this, so then what does it mean, right? So that means a is equals to a minus 1. Okay, so if I am giving a into equals to 5 or something like that, okay, so then what does that mean? That means a is equals to a into 5. Okay, so a by equals to 2 or something like that if I've given. So then what does that mean, right? So that means a equals to a by 2, right? So this way also you can so use these arithmetic operators, right? So to assign a particular value into that particular variable, right? So this is also one of the ways that you can use the operators, right? So this is something we haven't discussed, right? We forgot to discuss that, but so I'm just so explaining this today. Next comes to conditional statements, right? So what all things we have in conditional statements? We have if, right? So in if, what will happen, right? So you'll give if, and you'll give the condition here, right? If the condition is evaluates to true, then whatever piece of code that you have written within that if block, right, that code will be executed. If this condition is false, then it will not execute the whole block, and it will come out of this, right? And whatever code that you have written after that, so that code will be executed, right, in our overall right, so execution, right, in our overall program, wherever you have this if. Okay, so what will happen, right? If this condition satisfies, then this piece of code will execute. Otherwise, so the code that is above that one and the code that is below that one will be executed. Okay, so if that is true, then it will execute. Otherwise, it will not. Okay, so that's what this if is all about. And then what about if else, right? So if else is all about, right? So I mean, like, you have a condition, and if that condition satisfies, right, you want to execute something, and if that condition is not satisfying, you want some other thing to execute. So in that case, what can you do, right? You can use if else block, right? So then in that case, right, if this condition is satisfying, it will execute this one. If this condition is not satisfying, right, so and in that case, what will happen, right? It will execute the below one, that whatever you have written in the if else block, right? So that is what if else is all about. And then if else if, right? So in if else if, what all things we have? If else if, or if else if else, right? You can call that in any way, right? So you will write a condition. If this condition satisfies, right, so then it will execute whatever you have written in this block. If this condition is not satisfying, right, so then what will happen, right? So so I mean, like, if you want to check for one more condition, right, you want to so execute something. If this condition is satisfying, right, so then you'll write it like this. And if this condition is not satisfying, and you want to check for one more condition, right, to execute some other thing, so in that case, what you'll do, right, you'll use if else if. Okay, so and whenever you are writing if, else is not mandatory. So the same way, right, so while writing if else if, right, if you want to use one more else condition here, else here, right, you can write, you can have that else. Otherwise, you can just simply skip it. Okay, so that's what this if else is all about, right? If else if is all about. Okay, and then nested if, right? So in any if, right? So what you can do, right? If or whatever it could be, right? So in any of these if else ifs, right? So what you can do, right? So if this condition is satisfying and you want to check for more conditions, right? So within that, so block of code, then what you can do, you can write any number of conditions, right? Whichever way you want to have. Okay, so either if only one if condition, or if multiple, if else's, or multiple if else ifs and all of that, right? If you want to write that, you can write it as well, right? So either in within if you can write it, or maybe even in else also, so you want to write any of this if else ifs once again, right? You can still do that, right? So that's what this nested if is all about. And then what we have seen something called switch. What the switch will work like, right? Look like, right? Switch, right? On, right? You'll give an expression here, right? If this expression, not if, right? So let's forget about it. Okay, switch on expression. So and then we'll use when, right? So we'll have some particular value here, right? So that either you can directly use the value, or you can use some expression which is evaluating to a particular value. Okay, so there, I mean, like, so in our so if and all of that, right? So whatever expression, right, whatever conditional expression that you are giving here, that should only evaluate to either true or false. Okay, but here it is not like that, right? So these expressions can evaluate to any value. Okay, so then what will happen, right? So I mean, like, so based on whatever value that you are so getting as an output from this expression, so based on that expression, right? So if you want to execute something, right, you can execute so using this so what is it, right? These when blocks. Okay, so right, so that is how it is, right? If whatever value that we are getting out of this expression, right, so that value is not matching with any of the values that we have with the whens that we are having here. So in that case, what you'll do, we'll have something called else, right? So within this else, right? So in that case, right, you'll have to write when else, right? So in that case, what will happen is that, right? So if nothing is getting satisfied, then so it will just simply come here, and whatever you have written in it, right? So it will execute that particular thing. Okay, so in switch, there is one more thing that we have missed yesterday, right? So now let me explain you that also. Okay, so switch, okay, switch on, right? So let me give you one I mean, like, so one example here, right? So what do we want to do is, right? So we want to take a value, right? Like, so as a weekday, right? We want to take a weekday, okay, into one of the variables, right? So weekday in the means, in the mean, I mean, weekday in the sense, right? So Sunday, right? So Monday, right? So Tuesday, like this, okay? Tuesday, Wednesday, right? So, and then Thursday, right? Friday, and then Saturday, right? So these are the weekdays. Okay, so now we know Sunday and Saturday are holidays, say for example. Okay, Saturday and Sunday are holidays. So now, based on the value, right, so that we are having in our A, what do we want to do is we want to print whether it is a holiday or working day, right? So Saturday and Sunday are holidays, any other days are holidays. Okay, so now you want to do it like, and now you want to print it, right? Whether so a given day is a so holiday or working day. Okay, so in that case, what can we do? We can just simply write it like this, right? So string, right? So string A or weekday or whatever it could be, right? So string A equals to, right? We can take a particular value, right? So what is that? Let's say, for example, I'm taking Monday here. Okay, so Monday or Sunday, whatever you want to take it, you can take it. Okay, so now what we have to check, right? And if you want to write it using switch, right, the same thing, right? And if you want to display whether a given day is a weekday, is a working day or a holiday, right? If you want to execute that with the help of switch, how can we do that, right? So we know that, right? So switch on, tell me guys, switch on what? Switch on A, that's what it is, right? So switch on A means whatever value that we are getting here. Switch on A, then tell me when, tell me guys.
When A equals,
when, no, you should not give equals to. Okay, so you should give the value directly here. Okay, when Sunday, what is it? When Sunday, working day, sorry, holiday, right? right? So whatever you are giving here, right, that should evaluate to a what? Tell me, guys. That should evaluate to a value, right? So at the end of the day, that should evaluate to a value. Either you can give an expression or you can give, a direct value. But, so when a double equals to Sunday, that is what you are saying, right? So in that case, what will happen, right? So it will give you either true or false. Okay. True or false, but we don't want true or false, right? In this case, right? So there will be cases where you have to use true or false as well. But in our case, that is not, needed for us. Okay. So what we need, right? We just need the days, so whatever weekday that we have, right? That is what we need here. That's it. Okay. Not, anything apart from that. Right. So in that case, what can we do? Right. So when Saturday, right? So it's a holiday, right? So when Monday, what is it? Tell me, guys, when Monday, working day.
Working day.
Okay. So when, right, this is how we have done it, right? So when Tuesday, right? So again, working day. When Wednesday, again, it is a working day. So, and after that, what do we have, right? So we have multiple other things, and at last, right? So we have Saturday also, right? So when Saturday, right? Holiday. If that is not working, then when else, right? So if whatever string that has given here, right? If that is not matching with any of these values, right? So when, what you can do, when else, right? So wrong input or something like that. So that is what we want to print, right? So now we clearly know that, right? From Monday to Friday, okay, from Monday to Friday, we are printing the same value, isn't it so? Right? So we are printing only the same value, which is working day. So in that case, do we need to write the same thing multiple times? Right? So in that case, right, whenever you are having this type of, use cases, right, you don't need to write that same thing, right, so multiple times, right? We can still, so reduce the number of lines of code, right? So now let me quickly show you how can we reduce this. Okay. So in order to do that, what can you do is, right, instead of writing these many lines, we can just simply write 2 to 3 vents. That's it. Okay. Instead of writing how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 7. And along with that, we have, else, when else block as well. That means we are writing 8 vents. Okay. So now instead of writing 8 vents, we can just, simply achieve this requirement writing, 3 vents. Okay. I'll show you how can that is possible. Okay. So now we have to write just simply like this. When Sunday, comma, Saturday. That means what? Whenever the value that you are having, right? So in A is either Sunday or Saturday, or Sunday or Saturday, then, just simply execute this, right? So what you can do, then just simply, print holiday, right? This is a holiday. Then what about others, right? So we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and all of that. So in that case, what can you do, right? So we know, right? Even for Sunday and Saturday, we are executing the same block of code, right? So for that reason, what I've done, right? Instead of writing 2 vents, I just simply brought those 2 values here, separated by comma. So now what will happen, right? If, whenever the value that is coming from this A is either Saturday or Sunday, then it will just simply execute this particular thing. Instead of writing 2 different when blocks, we just simply, included that into a single and when block. Okay, now the same thing goes here as well. When Monday, comma, Tuesday, comma, Wednesday, comma, Friday, right? Till Friday. Okay. So then what will happen, right? So then execute this. If, so the value that is there in A is either Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Friday, then execute this block of code, right? So which is working day. Okay. So why we are doing this? As I told you earlier, right? For all of these values, right? So we are executing the same, lines of code. Right. So in that case, right, you don't need to write those many lines of code. You can just simply bring all of those values, right? So, and you can just simply write it like it. Okay. And if no value is matching, so both the vents, right? So the values that we have given in both the vents, then in that case, right? So we should write this when else block as well, right? So wrong weekday. Okay. So let's do it. Right. Tell me. string weekday or a whatever it is, right? So string weekday. I just simply gave that variable name as weekday. Okay, string weekday. I'm just simply giving Monday or something like this here. Okay, either you can give it or you don't need to give it, right? In that case, we can initialize this. I'm just simply initializing with some value. Okay, let's just simply see that. 1 second. Okay, string weekday. Okay, right. Tell me now what's next. When. So not when. Okay. So switch on weekday. Okay, this is the expression. We are just simply directly giving the expression. I mean, like, so the variable itself as an expression. But generally, you can, so write any type of expressions that you want to write, bigger ones, smaller ones, or something like that. But this expression should evaluate to a single value. Okay, so that's what it is. Right. So single value in the sense, right? So any expression, right? So it need not to be, simple true, false, or something like that. It need not to be a condition, right? So it can evaluate to any value. Okay, so that's what it is, right? So weekday in our case, right? So this is evaluating to whatever value that we are giving here. Okay, so if you are giving Monday, right, this will evaluate to Monday. If you are giving some other thing, it will evaluate to that particular value. That's what it is, right? So and then what? When? Tell me guys, when? Monday, right? System dot debug working day, right? So this is what we want, right? So system dot debug working day. So the same thing goes with other values as well, right? So when Monday, right? So and then Tuesday, right? Wednesday, okay? Thursday, right? Friday, okay? So and at last, right? So when Saturday, right? Holiday, okay? The same way when Sunday also, we should give holiday. Okay, if if the value that we are giving here is not matching with any of these values that we have given so in front of all of our vens, then in that case, right, so we can execute this. Okay, what is this? When else wrong weekday, that's it, something like this. So now if you clearly observe, right, for all of this Tuesday, right, so Wednesday, Thursday, right, so there is a spelling mistake here. Okay, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, not Friday, Saturday, right? Thursday, Friday, right? So we are executing the same piece of code. Okay, we're executing the same piece of code. In that case, right, you don't need to write these many lines of code. That is what we have just discussed, right? So we can bring all of them together into a single when statement. Okay, but before that, let's execute this, right? In this case, what will happen, right? Since this is a Monday, right? So this when block will execute and it will come out of the whole switch statement. Okay, so now let me just simply click on execute and see what will happen. Right, so now let me just simply debug only and see what will happen, right? So we got working day as output, right? So this is working fine. So, but we want to reduce the number of lines of code. So, right, in that case, what you can do is, right, you can just simply add all these values separated by comma. Okay. Wednesday. And then Thursday. Right. And then Friday. Okay, so what is this? What is that you want to execute? This is the one, this is the code that you want to execute. So in that case, you don't need all these when statements. You can remove all of them. So then what will happen, right? So when the value that you are, I mean, like whenever you have the value that you are getting here, right? So it's matching with any of these values, this piece of code will automatically gets executed, right? So when The same thing goes with Saturday and Sunday as well. When Saturday and Sunday, right? So what can we do, right? So we can just simply separate it by comma. We can keep it like this, and we can remove this when as well. So now see how many vens we got? Only 3 vens, right? So earlier we had 8 vens. Now we have only 3 vens, right? So now let me just simply change it to any of the values, right? So Thursday or whatever it could be, and see what will happen. Okay, so I have given Thursday. That means what will happen, right? So within this one we have Thursday here. So that means, so it will execute this piece of code. Let's execute it and see what will happen. What is the output that we got? See, working day. Okay, so let me just simply change the value that we are giving here, right? So instead of, Thursday, let me give Sunday. Okay, so and see what will happen, right? So we have Sunday here, right? So now this line of code will be executed, right? So let me just simply execute it and see what will happen. Wrong weekday. Why? What happened? Right? So is there any spelling mistake here? Yes. So this is capital S and this is small s, right? So Sunday day. Okay. So, right. Okay. So let's just simply execute this and see what will happen. Right. So again, it is giving wrong week. Now again, also it will give the wrong weekday. Now let's quickly check that. Okay. So wrong weekday. I'll tell you why it is coming up like this. Okay. So yes, Salesforce is a, so case, what is it? I mean, like, so it's not a strongly typed language. Okay. So, but still, right, in some cases, right, so it will behave like that. So in what cases is that? Okay. So in when, so we are comparing strings. Okay. So when we are comparing strings, in that case, what will happen is that, right, it will, consider it as, so it'll act like, so strongly typed language. Okay. So now just simply check the same thing, right? So whatever question that you have asked, right? Now let's check that with one more example. Okay. So then you'll get a clarity on that. Okay. But so what do we have? Right. So we have capital S here, but we're in, so we have small s here. So for that reason, it didn't took that. Okay. Right. So now let me try to give Saturday here and see what will happen. Let's execute this. Then it should execute this piece of code. Right. So now just simply execute this and see what will happen. Unexpected token switch. Where? So now let's execute this. See what will happen. Holiday. Okay. So now let's give Sunday, right? The same thing. See, now we got holiday. Okay. Right. So, and then what's next? Right. So, if we are giving some others, so value, right? So then what will happen? Right. So let me execute this and see what will happen. Right. So now you'll get something like wrong weekday. Okay. So now Nagaraj has asked one question. Right. So what is it? Anna, I mean, like, so Salesforce is a case insensitive language, right? So case insensitive means what? Right. So, I mean, like, so it will consider ABC. Okay. So ABC and ABC as same. Okay. So that's why we call that as case insensitive language, right? If it is a case sensitive language, what it will do, it will consider this ABC and this ABC as separate, so things altogether. But Salesforce doesn't consider them like that. Okay. So, but in this case, what happened, right? So we have used capital S, right? So, and we have made it as Sunday, and but we have small s, right? So, but what happened, right? So because of that reason, right? So both of them were not matched. But in general, right? So since Apex is a case insensitive language, right? So both of should match, right? So both of should be the same. But why that didn't happen here? So now let's quickly check that. Okay. So, but first quickly check, right? Whether this is true or not, right? So case insensitive, whatever we have just discussed, right? So whether that is true or not, first check that, right? So to check that, what we have to do, let's take one simple example and see what will happen. Okay. So let me just simply keep all of this into one. I mean, like, so let's keep everything into a what is it comments, and let's check it out. Okay, so now let's take two strings. Okay, so string string string, okay, string 1 equals to something, right? Or maybe let's take two strings. A equals to string 1. Okay, so now let's take one more string. String B equals to, right? So string 1, right? So we are giving the same thing, but what I'll do is I'll just simply use capital S here. So I'm using small s here. So now let's compare two strings and see whether both of them are equal or not. So, but just looking at this, we know, right, both of them are equal. But the major difference is, right, we have small s here and we have capital S here. Okay, so now let's compare both of them, right? So if, right, A double equals to B, right? So now let's check, right? So now let's just simply print equal. Both of them are equal. Okay, so system dot, if we want to print, what should we do, right? System dot debug, right? So both are equal. Okay, so both are equal, right? So now the same thing, right? So if else, what should we do, right? So else both are not equal, something like this. Okay, now let's see what will happen, right? So else system dot debug, both are not equal. Okay, so now let's execute this and see what happens. See, what do we got? We got both are equal, right? So this has capital S, this has small s. Okay, so but still both of them become equal, right? So there is no problem here. But in this case, right, so in this particular case that didn't happen, no? So earlier we have given cap Sunday with capital S, right? So it didn't took so that particular value, so and considered it as, both of them are equal. But here it is considering both of them are equal. Why? So the reason why, because, right, so whenever you are using something in when statement, right, so whenever you are using any values, right, so in so your when statements, right, so in this switch when, right, so then what should happen is, right, so they should, both of them should exactly match. Otherwise, so it will not consider them as the same values. Okay, but in other cases, right, this is not a problem. But whenever you are using any so strings as values, right, so whenever you are using any strings as values in when switch when statement, right, so then, right, so it should match exactly with each and every single word, single so alphabet that you are giving in any of the strings. Okay, so that is something you have to keep in mind. But generally, Salesforce is a case sensitive language, right? So case insensitive language. That means, right, so string A, right, so this variable is there, right? So this A and this A is also equal. Okay, so that means, right, this A double equals to B you have given, right? So this is, this one and this one are the same thing. Okay, so why? Because Salesforce is a case insensitive language, or it is not a strongly typed language. Okay, so there are other programming languages like JavaScript and all of that, right? So what they'll consider is, right, so they'll consider this one, this A and this A as different variables altogether. But so Apex will consider both of them as the same thing. Okay, so that is something you guys have to keep in mind, but only when you are using it, when right, so it will consider this whole thing as a separate value altogether. Okay, so not just, it will not just simply consider this as a string, it will consider the whole thing as a separate value, right? So for that reason, what happened, right, so whenever you have used this, it didn't so consider both of them as equal. Okay, so that is something you guys have to keep in mind. Okay, so now let's quickly check this, right? So this is small a and this is big A. So now let's execute this. Now also you'll get the same value, which is like, both are equal. Okay, so it will not make much difference. See, both good. Okay, right. So now, so within our operators, right, so not operators, within our conditional statement, so there is one more, so conditional statement that we have missed, which is called as ternary operator. We call that as operator. Why? Because I'll tell you why we call that as an operator. Okay. So, but before that, right? So there is something called ternary operator. What does this, what does it generally do? Okay. So this is also a small, this is also an if else statement. Okay. This is also an if else statement, but instead of writing, right, if and your condition, right? So, and then, if that the condition does it matches, right, execute this, else, so execute some other thing, right? So instead of writing this much big thing, right? So if you have some simple small calculations, right, so that you have to do, and based on that you have to execute some small single line of code or something like that. So in that case you don't need to write this much big so if else blocks. Okay, so you can just simply make use of this ternary operator to achieve that particular requirement. So now let's quickly see that. Okay, so what exactly it is, right? So let me just simply delete all of this, right? So, or else let's keep it the same way, right? So let's compare both, so basic if else and the ternary operator, right? So if you're using ternary operator, what will happen is that, right? So you'll just simply give, so your condition, okay, and then question mark. If the condition satisfies, right, so whatever you want to execute, right, so generally what happens, right, so if the condition is satisfied, this is what we'll execute, right? So execute, so execute one, let's call this as execute. Okay, execute second block of code, execute first block of code. That's what this is, right? So if this condition is satisfying, generally we'll execute this one. If this condition is not satisfying, right? So if this condition is not satisfying, we'll execute this one. The same thing goes here as well. Okay, in ternary operator, what we'll do is we'll just simply write the condition. So this generally goes in a single line. That's it. Okay, so we'll just simply give the condition, right? Like how we give the condition here. The condition will directly give here, and after that we'll use a small question mark. And after that, what we'll do is we'll just simply so give whatever you want to execute here, right? So in this case, right, so execute one is the one that I want to execute. If this is not, if this condition is not satisfying, right? So then what do we want to do, right? So we want to execute two. In that case, what you have to do is, right, you have to use some small colon, and then you have to give whatever you want to execute here. Okay, so this way, right, so you will, so you can achieve the same kind of thing, right? So if else, the same if else related stuff, right, you can achieve that with the help of single line. Okay, so this we generally use whenever we have small things that needs to be executed. If we have 10 lines or 20 lines of code, then this doesn't make much sense, right? So this will look better compared to this one. But if you have so simple things, right, so that you want to execute, so in that case what you can do, right, you can make use of this ternary operator. So there is a reason behind this. Why we call this as operator is because, right, whatever value that you get from out of this so thing, that you can assign it to some variable. Okay, so you can assign it to some variable. So that is what it is, right? In general, if you are writing if else condition, you cannot assign this whole block to some variable, right? We cannot do that in general. Okay, can we do that? We cannot do that, right? So this will consider, the whole thing will be considered as a separate block of code. But here it is not like that, right? So whatever value that you are getting out of it, if you want to assign it to a particular variable, you can assign it. Otherwise you can just simply execute the whole thing as a separate so block, right? So you can do either ways. That is the reason why we call this as an operator. Otherwise we don't call it as an operator, but still we can call it as an operator. The reason why, because, right, even though this works similarly the same way like how other conditional statement works, so the reason why we call it as an operator is because you can assign the value, that whatever value that is coming out to a variable, if this is evaluating to a single value, or else if this is not evaluating to a single value, and if you are having so multiple instructions that needs to be executed, and in that case you don't need to use this variable. You can directly just simply write this and execute it. That's it. Okay, so now just simply try to so take one simple let's try to take one small example and see how I can achieve that with both the ternary operator and the simple if else, and let's compare both of them. Okay, how both of them looks. Okay, so we generally don't use this very much, but still you should be knowing this. Okay, so if you are using it for small single line if else conditions, then this is the best approach to go with. But even if you want to write some bigger ones, still you can do that with the help of ternary operators. But it is always, I mean, like, so as a best practice, we always use the regular if else condition if you are having, you know, huge lines of code. And if you are having single line of conditions that you need to check, in that case we'll go with this. Okay, so now just simply go back to our anonymous window and quickly check that out. Right, so debug, open anonymous window. Right, let me right, so comment this and let's come down. Okay, so we have seen one example yesterday, which is, right, so we want to check whether a given number is a positive number or not. So that is one of the requirements that we have seen yesterday. Okay, so if a is equals to some value, if you're taking this, we want to check whether that is a positive number or a negative number. Okay, so for that, what we have done, guys, yesterday, we want to check whether a given number is a positive number or not. So what we have done yesterday, right, to check that integer, tell me, guys, integer a, what we have done yesterday, just simply tell me that integer a equals to, we can take one number. Okay, if you don't want to speak out, then I'll just simply continue. Okay, so then it's problem for you. Okay, your wish, right, whichever way you want to go it. So that's why I'm asking you to be active. Okay, now integer a equals to 10. So what's next? Integer a equals to 10, and right, so if what we have written, if a greater than 0, right, so then system dot debug a is positive, right? So this is what we thought of, so having, right, and this is how we so executed it, right? So
Greater than equals to 0 down.
not equals to 0. Okay, greater than
0
equals to 0.
positive.
Yeah. So greater than equals to 0. Okay, right, so let's keep it like this. Okay, not greater than equals to, right, so equals to symbol, it should come here. Okay, greater than equals to 0, right, so positive. Else what we have done, right, so system dot debug a is negative. Okay, so this will work fine, we know that. Okay, so now let's just execute this and see what will happen. That you'll get the same, so you'll get an output as positive, right? Right, so a is positive, so that's well and good. So now try to achieve the same thing with ternary operator. Okay, so what I've told you, in ternary operator, either you can assign it to a variable or you can just simply leave it like that. So whichever way you want to do it, you can do it. Okay, so first what I'll do is I'll just simply execute it without assigning it to a variable. Okay, so what can we do, right? So let me just simply keep all of this into comments. Okay, so I've done it. Okay, so what's next, right? So integer, right? So not integer, right? So what I've told you, yeah. So we can just simply write, okay, integer a equals to 10, right? So let's keep it like this. So instead of writing this big if else block, what you can do, you can just simply write it like this. Okay, so tell me, what is the condition here? What is the condition here? A, tell me, guys, what is the condition here?
Equals to 0.
A greater than or equals to 0. This is the condition. Okay, first write the condition. And after that, what do we have to do? We have to use question mark, right? So, and after that, what is that we have to do? We have to, if A is greater than 0, then whatever you want to execute, right? So that you have to give here, right? If that's not happening, so then what do you want to do? Then what do you want to do? Tell me, guys. What do you want to do? We want to execute what? Execute what? Tell me. A is negative. Right, so this is what you want to so do, right? So now let's quickly so check it out, right, and see what will happen, what would be the output of this. Okay, right, so it'll throw some syntax error. Just quickly check, so have a look, right? So what syntax error we are receiving. So what it is saying, we are expecting a brace here, right? So why it is expecting a brace, right? So let's keep all of this into a keep all of this into a keep all of this into brackets. So then it will make more sense. Okay. So now what we are doing, right? So if this condition is satisfying, so then execute whatever that is there in these brackets, right? So if not, then execute whatever that is there in here. Okay. So now let's execute this, right? So again, I believe we'll get a syntax error. Otherwise, yeah. So line 1, column 1, right? So let's remove this particular thing. Right. So now let's execute this. Let's see what. Array yaar, column 2. What the heck? Just give me a second, guys. Just give me a second. So if something goes wrong, right? So apex ternary operator. So I mean, like, so there will be a lot of, so articles that you generally see, but most of the times, right, try to go to developer guide. Okay. So someone named Biswajit Samal, he also has written something on this, but I always try to go to the Apex reference guide. So if you're not able to understand that, then only go for other, blog related articles. Okay. So the people who have written it and all of that. Okay. Ternary. अरे यार, कंट्रोल F. Or else let's do one thing, right? So, uh, so instead of writing, see, that's why I said, right? So most of the times we use it if we want to execute it for single line of codes and all of that. But the whole syntax is correct. But the only thing is like, so we are using multiple lines of thing and all of that, right? So for that reason, what can we do is, let's do one thing. Let's divide all of that into different variables altogether, right? So this one, let's, so divide that, let's, bring that into a separate variable. Now let's see, you'll get to know how we are doing this. Okay. So string, let me do this. Okay. String, so outcome. Okay. Something like that. I'm writing it. Okay. So outcome. Okay. String outcome we have, right? So now here, what can we do? Right. So string outcome means what kind of value that can be stored into it, right? So we can store only strings into it, right? So now what can I do? Here I can just simply write, right? So what is it? What is the outcome, right? So what would be the outcome? Positive. Okay. So if that is not happening, then what would be the output? Negative, right? So that is what, we are discussing, right? So negative. So now what can we do? Right. I've already told you as well, right? Earlier, what is that? Right. So you can assign this to a variable, right? So whatever outcome that you are getting out of this, right? You can assign this to a variable. So in our case, what can we do? We can just simply, use outcome equals to, right? So in this case, what can we do? Right. So we can just simply keep it like this. So then what will happen, right? First, it will check for this condition. If this condition is satisfying, right? So whatever that we have given here, so it will take that and assign it to this particular variable, right? So if this condition is not satisfying, right? So then what it will do, it will just simply bring whatever that is there here, and it will assign this value to this particular variable. So now what you can do, right? You can just simply print system dot debug, right? So outcome. Okay. So this way also it can be done. Right. So now what will happen, right? So if it is positive, it will, so you'll have positive value into this. If it is negative, you'll have negative value into this. Right. So now let me just simply execute this and see what will happen. Positive. And let's see if we can, execute any kind of, I mean, like, so multiple lines of code using ternary operator. Okay. So let's check it out. Right. So for that, what can we do is, right? So let's take the same example here. Right. So a greater than or equals to 0. Right. So what I'll do is system.debug, the same thing. Right. System.debug. Right. So let's keep this as a block of code. Okay. So and see what will happen. Right. So whether this works fine or not, let's check it out. Okay. So system.debug. Okay. So this is positive. Right. So this is negative. Okay. So instead of, so writing all of this, let's just simply try to execute this and see what will happen. So it will definitely throw an error. So if that throws an error, then that's fine. If that doesn't throw an error, that is also fine. Okay, so let's quickly see that. Right, so it is saying unexpected token. Okay, so it is not allowing us to execute in a single line. Okay, so what it is, making, I mean, like asking us to do. So please assign it to a particular variable. Okay, so that is what it is. Right, so in general, right, in other programming languages that is possible. Right, so you can execute that as a separate, so line altogether. But in Apex, it is not allowing us to do that. Why? Why? Because whatever output that you get, so that output you must assign it to some variable. Okay, that's the reason why what we have done, right? So we have created one variable named outcome, and then, right, so we have just simply included this. And if this is working fine, if this particular condition is satisfying, right, so assign this value to this one. If this condition is not satisfying, assign this value to this particular one. Right, either this can be a single string, right? So what is it? 1 second. Right, so this is what it is, right? So system dot, not system.debug, right? So system.debug means what is it, right? So this is not a value. This is not an expression. Okay. So this is, an execution. Okay. That we are doing, right? So this is one of the instruction that we are, so giving our computer or the maybe, so our Salesforce instance to perform. Okay, this is a task directly, right? So we should not include tasks into here, but you can include any kind of expressions if you want to include, right? You can include expressions into this particular thing. So now let's try to, so include an expression. So what kind of expression? So string, right? So instead of string, if you want to have some kind of number or something like that, okay, so you can still have that, right? So now what do you want to do, right? You want to, if a is greater than 0, right? You don't want to print it as a print, I mean, like, so positive and negative and all of that, right? So you want to do something, right? You want to have some kind of expression or something like that. Okay. So if a is greater than 0, so what do we want to do, right? So we want to multiply this number with some 10 or something like that. So in that case, what you can do, right? So a into 10. Okay. So this is an expression, right? So which will evaluate to a single value. So that value can be assigned back to this outcome. Okay. The same way, what can we do, right? The same way, right? If that is negative, what we want to do, right? We want to, so multiply this a with what? So -1 or something like that. So if you are multiplying this with -1, what will happen, right? So this will be converted into minus into minus. What will happen, right? So it's a basic mathematics. Minus into minus will come as a plus, right? So now, right, -25 into -1 will come as a positive, so number, right? So we are just simply converting that into a positive number, right? So this negative, if that is a negative number, we are converting it into a positive number. If that is a positive number, we are multiplying it with 10 and we are bringing that output and we are trying to print it out, right? So this is an expression, right? So this is also a separate expression. Now quickly see this and quickly look into this and see what will happen. Okay. So, and this value, we are assigning it to this particular variable, right? So this should execute. Now let's quickly check this and see what will happen. Unexpected token equal. line 252, column 9. Why? Let's remove this in this case. Just simply keep that as a simple expression. Yeah. Okay, so you need not to use those blocks. Okay, so why you need not to use those blocks is because I'll tell you. Okay, so when you are using block, what will happen? You can have multiple lines of code into it, right? So, but here we are not writing multiple lines of code, right? So we are just simply using an expression, right? So for an expression, why do you need, a block, right? So if you're using a block, what does it mean? So we know, right? So there is a difference between single line of code. If it is a single line of code, right? So you don't need a block. Only if you are having multiple lines of code, you need a block, right? But what we have done, let's say, even though this is a simple expression, so we have used block here. So for that reason, it didn't allowed us to execute this line of code, right? So, and then what we have done, we have just simply moved those blocks and it worked fine. Why? Because it's a simple expression. Okay. So what happened, right? Since this is minus 25, so now minus 25 into minus 1, right? So came as what? Came as what? Came as
25.
positive number. Yeah. So positive
Positive.
number, which is 25. Okay. So now let me try to give some kind of, so positive number here. Instead of negative number, let me give 25 directly and let me execute this and see what will happen. See, 250. Just simply multiplied, so that with the regular number and we got, multiplied that with, 10 and we got 250 as an output.